Sir, can we start now? Good morning, everyone. Sir is with us now, so we shall start the session. Sir, over to you, sir.
Just check if my slides are visible. Is my slides visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. We will build on what we just discussed yesterday morning. That was a broader overview. This is a lot more technical and very specific, and also very general, so that down the line, what Arul does, what Sharad does, what Roshan does fit into this. Okay? So I'm trying to link pattern recognition with data sciences, and the link between pattern recognition and data sciences is through what we generally do in machine learning. Okay, so that way machine learning is one of the uh, schemes of things which data sciences frequently uses. There are other schemes which are equally frequently used. Those are statistical in nature. Yeah. So data sciences involves not data processing per se, in the sense that we don't do data processing like what computers used to do earlier. We still use the computers, but our view of data has changed. This in data sciences, data processing is done via an idea called pattern recognition or pattern extraction. So you are in a large cloud of data, terabytes, which are definitely not feasible to work in real time through whatever, however powerful a computer you may use. But if I can extract the patterns that more or less represent the data reasonably well. A good example is when we meet each other, uh, we recognize individuals mostly based on the face. We don't even see the rest of the body. So we just look at the face and recognize people, even though there may be variations in the face. Somebody may have grown old, somebody may have had an injury, somebody would have grown a mustache which was not there, or shaved a mustache which was there. The hair may have turned gray. All this happens. But we still recognize instantly without doing any great numeric processing. Okay. So what the brain does is pattern processing. Brain doesn't do data processing because we are very poor with numbers. If I give you two 5-digit numbers and ask you to multiply, we are pretty poor. We take a long time and we still make mistakes. But if I give you a photo with 100 faces and ask you to recognize your friend in that, quickly you will be able to do that. Okay. Even the phone call, you hear the voice and you immediately recognize the identity. There is no face for that. Okay. So such things are what human brain is very good at. Human brain is very good at pattern processing tasks. Computers are very good at number processing. So what we are now trying to do as machine learning, data sciences, AI and all that is trying to make computers closer to human way of tasking, like obstacle avoidance, automatic navigation, face recognition, looking for patterns in large data. All these things are, that's really why ML is picking up very strongly, because it is coming very close to what humans do. Like the example we saw of beating the world champion in chess, beating the Go champion in chess, beating the human champion in quiz, etc. etc. Okay. So the trick is not just data processing, but if you have a huge cloud of data, can I extract a pattern that represents that or recognize a pattern which is there? Either of them. So you either extract the features, or using the features you recognize the object or whatever it is. Okay. So pattern extraction is done by identifying features inherent in all data. For example, the features we have for a face, like our nose, slightly similar is the nose of the gorilla or the chimpanzee, right? Whereas the nose of, let's say, a parrot or a dolphin, whatever it is, they are quite different. So, there are features inherent in all data. Even the most bizarre data does have features inherent in it. It may be difficult to extract. It may be even more difficult to identify, but it is there. Okay. For example, many of you may have encountered a classic painting uh, where you see one image from a distance, but as you go nearer to that, that image becomes something else. Some horse or house or something is there, but as you go near, it looks like a dolphin or something. So this is really what is difficult about extracting patterns. All data is like this. Okay. In fact, the worst data could be something like a white noise, which is absolutely random, but that's handled in a different way. So if it is very bad, handling it is different. If it is very good, handling it is different. The ground reality is that all this data can be handled. Okay. These are finally used to classify data into two classes. For example, one of the key objectives of data sciences or data analysis is given data, you want to put it into two baskets. A basket which you think is of your need, your want, what you desire. Consequently, another basket where it doesn't need, doesn't desire, and it's not wanted. But if you can do it to two classes, doing it to n classes is very easy. Take it to two class, divide the two class into two more, etc., continue like a typical binary tree. Okay? So the trick is, given a collection of data, can I put it into two groups? This is called classification. So classification of data is the first thing before you start using, identifying, interpreting, whatever you want to do. But generally, you get, if you have very clean data of one kind, there is no need to classify. Our problem is, for example, here, even in a class, we get all the students. For various other cultural and other reasons, we want to segregate girls and boys and make them sit separately. You have a separate girls' room in the college, common to all these kind of segregation of objects, indirectly saying segregation of data, basically, is very necessary. Segregation into two classes, whatever it is evolutionary also. For example, when people pick grains in the field, they have to be clear that when they pick the grains, they don't pick things which are not grains. Many times the grains fall on the ground. You can't pick stones along with that. You have to avoid the stones, and many times the stones closely resemble the grain. So this kind of filtering is a universal human evolutionary trait. Those who are good at it actually succeed a lot. For example, in the stock market, you want to segregate all the healthy stocks from the toxic stocks, because many times the bad stocks or bad companies also give very good indices, high value. You want to know which is clean and which is dirty. Okay, so this kind of problem is universal and one of the central problems of data sciences. Okay, so we need to know what is this idea of features, pattern recognition, recognizing data associated with objects or data per se through patterns and not through numbers. Okay, so we will see some examples and understand what data science really is. So what is really pattern recognition? Informally, it is ability to recognize patterns in data. More formally, more algorithmically, it is assign an object or an event. It can also be an event to one of the several pre-specified categories, and these categories are called classes. For example, this image. I give this data. Even a nursery kid, kindergarten kid will look at this and say it is not only a face, it may also say it's a woman. Very clear. It doesn't need a computer. It doesn't need classroom teaching to recognize this. Whereas if you give this image data to a computer, all this, please remember, every point here will be a 8-bit or 16-bit binary code. And you put all these and ask the computer. It may even recognize it as a phone, because many of you may not be aware that historically phone was of this shape, which had one receiver and one transmitter. So you could not talk and hear at the same time. You talk, close it, hear, allow the other person to talk, and then again talk back. So simultaneous talking and listening was not available. In fact, if you don't train the algorithm well, it will recognize it more like a phone or a teacup, much less like a face. This is the problem with computer-based recognition tasks. Unless you teach the computer, please remember, all said and done, however much machine learning you do, however much artificial intelligence you do, the computer is quite dumb. It is powerful but very dumb. Unless you train it well, unless you teach it well, unless you give enough information for that, it will not do a good job. But if you do all that, it will do a very consistently good job forever and sometimes improve on that. So the trick is to teach the computer to do well. So unless you teach it well, this is most likely going to recognize it either as a teacup or as a phone, much less as a face. This is the problem of attempting to make computers work like humans. For example, here, I give data. Data can be about an object. So object classification is very similar to classification of data. In pattern recognition, you say object classification. In data sciences, you say data classification. Okay. So I give data about these objects, which are pictures. If I were to design a perfect pattern recognition system, if I were to, because we are trying to learn how it will be done, it will classify it into male and female, gender-based classification. So the data is classified into two classes, one relating to male, other relating to female. Now this is the problem with humans. Just see here, the same data can have second different answer, which is also correct. The same data can be classified either as a photo or not a photo. So now you have to be very clear to what class you are trying to look for. This is another problem with all good higher level problems. Higher level problems need not have one unique correct answer. It can have multiple correct answers. That's why it's very important to know the context. That context comes from domain knowledge. Please emphasis on domain knowledge. Only then you know. So subject to the domain of sketching, this is a photo. This is the correct answer. For this, subject to the context of gender, this is the correct answer. So you must know very clearly the domain specification, domain features, domain context, domain relationships, etc. etc. Okay. Suppose the problem was one of character recognition. I give in written words. This will classify it into HELLOWORD. All the characters A to Z. So output is 26 classes. What are the inputs? Inputs are billions of words. But all the words in English will have this. If you want to, you can include 0 to 9, in which case output will be 36 classes, which are alphanumeric. Suppose it's a problem of medical diagnosis. I take a CT scan or a pathology petri dish. I study objects which are tumors. These are data which have shape, size, orientation, etc. And I design a perfect pattern recognition system which classifies it into cancerous cells and not cancerous cells. Now you will recognize something interesting. What are non-cancerous cells? Non-cancerous cells are reasonably regular in shape. What about cancerous cells? All are irregular in shape. Of course, I could have added color. This would have been some color. This would have been grayish blue, dark red, depending on the type of cancer cells, pus cells, all this. So what is automatically done is taking pathology or physiology data, training a pattern recognition system to immediately classify it into 2 classes, then count the number of cancerous cells with the non-cancerous cells, and if the percentage of cancerous cells in total exceeds 20% or 10% also, you say you are a cancer patient. Then you see if it is 80%, it is 4th stage cancer. How do you recognize this from this? Color, shape, geometry, elongation, ovulation, volume, color, so many features. Here, regular, almost circular, no irregular shapes. This looks more like a polygon than a circle. What about speech understanding? You feed a waveform through a microphone, and if you have designed a good pattern recognition system, it will convert acoustic signal to phoneme recognition. It will have a metallic tinge because it is electronically synthesized. Okay. So the outputs are all the phonemes. If you want to look at problems of this kind, you need to know signal processing, acoustic and speech signals, characteristics of acoustic behavior. You also need to know very good English grammar, English pronunciation, all this. So any data science or pattern recognition task, if you want to do, you must have tremendous amount of domain knowledge both at the input and output. Just can't say I know C programming, I'll do it. Okay. So we will motivate ourselves by understanding how this is actually done. A very interesting example. This is very good slides from Kevin Murphy. I've been using it for a very long time. I think you've done a splendid job. There's also a new book on machine learning by Kevin Murphy, a very good book actually. Okay. So what is the task? The task is the following. I catch a lot of fish. Unless it's an inland fishery, you will not get one variety of fish. Normally two, sometimes three, sometimes four. Because it's like going to a railway station or bus stop, just scanning how many people are there. There will approximately be 100 people. Quite likely there will be 50 men and 50 women. You can't say all passengers are men. That doesn't happen in reality. Same is with when you catch fish in the sea or river. But predominantly two or three classes are there. We will see the problem of separating to two classes. That can be repeated to n classes, as I said. Okay. So I catch a lot of fish, and I catch in lakhs, in millions actually, and I want to sort it out into two dominant groups. One is salmon, other is sea bass, because these two live together. Very symbiotic relationship is there. It is like going to forest. You may not see a tiger frequently, but tiger is there only because lot of deer is there. If you remove the deer, tiger will die. If you remove the tiger, all the deer will start coming into your house in the city. So that predator-prey balance is there. If there are predators only because there is prey, and there are prey because there are predators. This symbiotic relationship is there. So I want to sort it out because salmon is 10 times more expensive than sea bass. So at least to sell a very high quality item, I must separate it out. So I have to do it automatically because these numbers are a million. Okay. So what do? I can put a conveyor belt, put the fish on that, and one fish at a time will come. I have a camera. It takes the image of the fish. I train a classifier, which is a pattern recognition system. So looking at the patterns of the fish, it will tell, okay, this fish is salmon. So there is a door here through a microcontroller. It will open, it will fall here. If the door is closed, this fish will come and fall as sea bass. This is what I want to do. I want to automate this because I have to handle millions of fishes in very quick time. Manually, it's not possible because this is done on the ship, deep sea. What we do in India is different. Our people capture all the fish, bring it to the shore, put it on the shore, manually sort it out. That's why you see as soon as the fishing boat comes to the port, hundreds of laborers will move there, taking it out, spread it. Then they do manual sorting, pay per basket, and most of the manual sorting is done by women. Okay. So how does a pattern recognition system work? Okay. First thing, collect data. Very important. Without data, you cannot speak anything. Okay. Data is the currency of the future. Okay. And classify by hand. Take some 100 fishes, classify by hand. What we are trying to tell is, please learn to solve simple problems by yourself first. Don't try putting everything on a computer. That's what happens. You put a lot of information into some package like MATLAB. It will give you plots. It will give you color outputs. You will not know whether it is right or wrong. More important, if it is wrong, you don't know where it is wrong, what to do. Okay. So always try to solve simple problems, small size problems by yourself. So you collect and you observe. This is salmon, this is sea bass, this is salmon, sea bass. What do you find? You extract possibly discriminating features, meaning what are the features by which you say this is salmon and this is sea bass. One thing, sea bass appears to be longer than salmon. Therefore, length as a feature can be used to separate. The other thing is lightness, how light it is, what is the width, how many fins are there, etc., etc. So finding out features for an object and finding out features which can discriminate two things is very challenging. This is what even the doctors do. When they go, they ask for features about your illness. Did you sleep well? Do you have cough? Open your eyes, open your tongue. What they are looking for is features with which they can identify a disease or a illness, based on which they will give you medicine. Many times when they cannot identify a feature, they will give you some medicine like mild medicine, broad spectrum, this thing. Say you go take it, come after 2 days if it doesn't improve. Meaning the features for them to decide on a illness is not very clear. So they want to observe you by asking you to come back after 2 or 3 days. Okay. So every problem, human problem, interesting human problem is discriminated through features. In fact, even in music, what is the difference between Lata Mangeshkar singing one song and another song? It's the same person singing with the same, but the features of the song and the features of the song can be extracted through many other ragas, gigas, all these, okay, patterns basically. Okay? So you then use these features and design a classifier. There are many models for a classifier. You have to choose one of the models and on that model train the classifier to do future suppression. Then after you train, test whether the classifier has worked well. If everything goes well, you have solved an interesting problem. We will see how it is done. How do you want to design the classifier? First, select a feature. What did I observe? Observe that salmon tends to be shorter. So you take about 50 fishes of both kinds and use fish length as a feature, one feature. Okay. For example, when many of your students go for placement, the companies are so stupid, they ask for features like average CGPA. That's all. One stupid feature they ask. Then they'll have another features in the interview called how well he communicates, whether he writes well or he speaks well. Invariably, they will select a person who is very poor in academics but speaks very well. That fellow, he or she will get selected. So everybody tries to look smart, act smart. The real bright people will not even go for the placement because it's a very stupid job they are being offered. They don't know. Because all these companies select people with wrong features. Why they select wrong features is they want them to obey and listen to them forever. They want good slaves. They don't want good officers. Okay. So length is one feature. Length of 2 centimeters, 4 centimeters, 8 centimeters, 10, 12, 14. This is indicative. I can make it 2, 3, 4. I can make it 2.1, 2.2. The resolution is left to you depending on the problem. Okay. The number of sea bass fishes of length 2 is 0. Salmon is 2. And length of 14 centimeters. Sea bass is 5, whereas salmon is 0. Meaning on average, salmon is shorter. And I write, that's why visualization is important. I write this graph. Length of a fish versus number of fishes. For example, length 8, there are 10 fishes, 13 fishes. 10 of this and 3 of the other. Okay. So when I write a graph like this is called histogram, which you would have done in class 6 or 7. What is histogram? A variable in x-axis and frequency of occurrence of that variable. This is what you did in class 6 or 7. That's why you see suddenly histogram which you did in class 6, you never used histogram in your engineering so far. Suddenly is one of the most important tools because all tools for data sciences is dominated by statistical parameters, statistical nature of analysis. Okay? So I do that. What is my objective? I want to separate all green from all maroon. How do I separate? I want a classifier. So classifier means a straight line. So I'll put some straight line like this. I select a length threshold and say all fishes of length lower than this, let it be salmon. This with length greater than that be sea bass. For example, at L equal to 5, if I put L equal to 5, 4, 5 here, lesser than this is salmon. So this and this fish also is classified as salmon. This fish, this and this are also classified as sea bass. What do I get? I check the error. Only one sea bass is wrongly classified, but 16 salmon is wrongly classified. Total wrong classification is 17. Total out of 50 fishes, 17 error is 34% error. 34% error is bad, but you have to be very clear that it has worked. Just see minus of the one minus of this in percentage. It is 66% accurate. 2 out of 3 fishes are accurate. So the question is, this method works. Can I make it better? I want about 95 to 98%, even 99% accuracy. Okay, what do? I choose L equal to 5. Can I choose other L's? I search. I put L equal to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Computer will do this very quickly. Classify it, and after searching through all the possible lengths, L equal to 9 gives me the best answer, which many of you know in data sciences. Any valley point is a good way to separate one class from another. This is what we do in histogram modification, histogram equalization, all these problems in images. So I get only 20% error. 1 in 5 is wrong. Earlier it was 1 in 3, now 1 in 5. 80% accurate with only one parameter like length. And length means a straight line like this. Very easy to implement. But I want more accuracy. How do I do? What did I learn from this? Length is a poor feature alone. What to do? Try another feature. Salmon tends to be lighter. Therefore, try average fish lightness as a feature rather than length. What happens when you do that? So, you have fish lightness on a scale of 1 to 5. And if I pick the fish lightness threshold at 3.5, I get 92% accuracy. And what did I select first? Length. Why length? Because length was very obvious. Another thing we learn in data through machine learning and data sciences. What is obvious is not necessarily the best. Don't ever, so human mind is also like that. What is very obvious? Who is the best student? The best student is the one who has got the highest marks. He may be he or she will never be the best because there are others close to them who are equally good. Perhaps they are better. They may not have got the highest marks. I got this very strange reinforcement. Some 4 or 5 years back, I went to RV College for some lecture. Since I didn't enter the Bangalore city, I came from Kengeri side since I was coming from Mysore. So I reached the college some 45 minutes before the inauguration. Nobody was there. What to do? I simply went around. I generally go look for canteen so that I can go, at least go drink one cup of tea. I went to the canteen. That also was not yet open. But I saw an interesting poster there in the college. They said, congratulations to some girl. That photo was put. She is the college topper. Why? She had secured some 835th rank in GATE exam, not the VTU exam, GATE exam. She was a college topper because she was the one who scored the highest in GATE exam, not VTU. Many more have got ranks and other things. So, what is obvious is not the best. That girl perhaps was the best in the college because she passed a tougher exam which toppers in the VTU could not have even cleared. So, the success of pattern recognition machine learning is to pick up features which actually do the job for you, and they may not be explicitly visible to your eye, or you may not be able to hear it. So what do? I want 95% accuracy. I can do even better by combining both the features. That is why it's called a feature vector. Earlier it was a feature scalar, one variable. Now two variable. I have length and lightness, and this will do with 96% accuracy. Suppose I want 98, 99, I will pick one or two more features. Normally, this feature space is non-linear. One feature gave you 90, two features gave you 96, three features may give you 97. About 4, 5 or 6 features will give you 98, 99. 25 features will give you 40%. So if you put too many features, problem gets confused. Okay. So what is the minimum number of features needed to do the best classification is something that empirically we will study. There is no formula for that. Okay. So you see here only two. One here, one wrong classification out of 50. It is 4% error, 96%. So I put a conveyor belt which also measures lightness and length, and using both it will separate, it will do a good job. They will pack the fish in the boat itself, come to the port, deliver the cans. This is how the modern fishing works. Of course, now they use radar, sonar, they have machine learning in it, all that is there, don't worry. That's why you will see the social context of this problem, where all along the coast in India, traditional fishermen are always fighting with the mechanized boat, particularly foreign mechanized boat, which come and take away all the fish which is in our waters. Okay. So this was the decision boundary. This is what is called the classifier. A classifier creates a decision boundary, and the decision to the left is salmon, decision to the right is sea bass. Two classes. People want 100% accuracy. If I put 100% accuracy, my decision boundary will look like this. Of course, I get 0% error, 100% accurate. But what happens? I have only 50 fishes. I will end up with 5 million fishes later, and it will look like this. You see here. More and more fishes. I did a sample trial on 50. It must work well on 5 million. When it happens, it will give me 75% accuracy. 25. What was 96% accuracy became 75 because I did the boundary very badly. Suppose I had preserved, this is what happened. Very poor generalization. I put a very complicated boundary on the sample data. On the bigger size data, it worked very badly. This is what is called overfitting. So typical problems are overfitting the data or underfitting the data. You want a perfect fit. We will see how it comes. Okay, this is what it is. So this is your training data. On the testing data, it looks like this. So simpler decision boundary does not perform ideally on the training data, but generalizes better on new data. So use a train this classifier like this. Don't use like this. This comes from a principle called William of Ockham. Entities are not to be multiplied without necessity, meaning don't complicate things. Don't complicate your solution. try simple solutions and it works. When the problem is very complicated, don't try a complicated solution. When the problem is very complicated, try collection of simple solutions. Like for example, landing onto the moon. It's a very complicated problem, sending a rocket from Earth to moon. But how have they done it? That's why all these rockets have multi-stage. Each stage breaks the problem down to one specific task. What is the first stage? First stage is simply to escape from the Earth's gravitational field, escape from Earth's atmosphere. You need huge thrust. The first stage is very big, that's why. Gone. After that, don't carry that, throw that first stage away. That's why after the first stage is over, that portion of the rocket is thrown out. What is second stage? Second stage needs lot of velocity because it has to go all the way to close to moon. But it doesn't need so much thrust because it is already in free space. It has already escaped the Earth's atmosphere, gravity. So with very little thrust, it can go all the way there. But that is so fast, it can go and hit the moon. That's why take the second stage off, put the third stage, which will allow you to slowly navigate to the moon's surface. So a complicated process has been broken down to three simple, well-defined stages, and hopefully it works, and it has worked. Okay, so this is really what it is. So how is the whole process done? This is it. You capture data. How do you capture data? Through sensors. What kind of sensors? Camera, microphone, medical image devices, your mobile phone, stethoscope, so many. Today you have 1,000 different ways you can capture data. And how you capture data is also domain dependent. You cannot capture X-ray through a camera. X-ray is different from camera. You cannot capture the stomach features through anything other than a CT scan or ultrasound, whatever you want to. Okay, so there are hundreds of well-established sensors for various domains, and new domains are coming to this feature. New domains of operation are coming to this machine learning task because new types of sensors are being prepared. Okay, collect that. Then pattern should be well separated. So you must segment the data because 90% of the data that you get will have obstruction, noise, occlusion, improper illumination, so many things. So cleaning the data, which is called segmenting, is another big task. After that, features. What are the features which define this problem? I have a photo. I want to separate the photo either through gender or through artwork. So what are the features? You must know very clearly what features capture the essence of the problem. So same, you want to select a teacher for the department. How do you evaluate? How do you evaluate? I've been selecting teachers for colleges for quite some time now, and my teachers are very clear. I first ask whether they are qualified in GATE or not. So a person who has qualified with a very low rank in GATE, I give more weightage than the first rank in VTU. Then many other parameters like that. So invariably, I am able to get reasonably good faculty coming, even though the number of people applying are 100 and 200. We can filter them out well. And many complain, I got first rank, I was not even selected. But the question to ask is, where did they get first rank? Okay. And I always select a person who has done PhD his or her own in an institution at higher level. Okay. So all these are features for a problem. How do you know the features for a problem? You must know the domain of the problem very well. That's why in medical field, somebody who was looking at gastroenterology will not touch neurosciences. Somebody who does neurosciences will not touch nephrology because each domain has become so specialized. Only specialists know the features there. Whereas general medicine, you go to a doctor's clinic, he is MBBS something very generic. He'll say, okay, you have flu, cough, and try. If it doesn't work, I'll send you to a specialist. That's the way it works. Okay. So you extract the feature, then based on that, you design the classifier. After it classifies, you can exploit domain context information and make it refinement. If the classification is wrong, you go back. Go back and see whether the features were wrongly chosen, or even worse, whether the segmentation was not done. Even worse, maybe I didn't capture the data correctly. When you have poor data, increasing the number of data points is not going to help. That's what we are having problems in. We have 2.5 lakh students in mechanical graduating out. So I am not able to get good one, not because the number is less. All are so poor, I really don't get a good feature, very few. So what is important for teachers in your colleges, as many of you are, you must increase the feature content in a student. If everybody says I know C programming, maybe one who is better than all of them will get selected. If somebody says C, I know C, somebody says I don't know C, maybe he knows something else which is not that. Maybe he knows thermodynamics, maybe he knows heat transfer, maybe he knows machine design. So you have to get more features in the students, more diverse features. Because one company comes for coders, one company comes from designers, one company comes for marketing people, all this. If you say all of them will train for coding job, very few will get it. This is the kind of problem that's happening in our colleges. Okay? So how do you design a pattern recognition system? Collect data, choose the features, choose a model for the classifier, train the classifier on the data, evaluate the classifier, and see if things are not correct, you can go back. And these two need prior knowledge, domain knowledge and experience, very important. Okay. This is what it is. Not easy to collect data, very expensive. More difficult is to get good data. Getting data is difficult. Getting too much nonsense data is very easy. Getting quality data is very difficult. Quality and diversity. Okay. After that, choose the features. See, you have data. If you had chosen the features very well, it would have easily separated. If you choose the features badly, data looks like this. Very difficult to separate. Prior knowledge plays a great role. Domain dependent. It should also be easy to extract all that. Okay. Then choose the model for the classifier. What type of model? For example, it may look crude, but suppose the problem is separating all the students in your class to two categories, girls and boys. How do you do? One feature is height. Make all of them stand in ascending or descending order. Put a threshold and say above this boys, above this, below that girls. Because generally, on average, girls tend to be shorter than boys. That's one way. The other model is to choose weight. Put everybody on a scale, rank them in weight order and keep a threshold and say below this is girls below. So, is to classify data based on a model. Now you want to know which model works, and if some model doesn't work, what other model to choose, all this. Again, based on experience. And what is the best classifier for a given problem? Unanswered. Many times it's trial and error, but many a times it is intuition and experience. Okay, which means you have solved many problems of similar kinds, and when nothing works, you think about and intuitively decide something. Next is to train the classifier. See? What is training the classifier? Process of using data to determine the parameters of the classifier. For example, you had this classifier. You did this. Okay? Yeah, you separated this from this. This is the classifier. What are the parameters of this classifier? This is simply y equal to mx plus b. Two parameters, m and c, b. So from hundreds of data points, I must capture the slope of this line and the intercept value. Two parameters to classify 20,000 points. That is how powerful classifiers are. So, what are the parameters of the classifier? Determine the parameters of the classifier. For example, the classifier which was a curve, it will be of the type y equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. So from all the data points, you must extract a, b and c, which is fitting a curve of least error, least squared error curve fit. Okay, what Gauss did. Okay, so change parameters of the chosen model so that the model fits the collected data, many different procedures and so on and so forth. In fact, there are courses in higher institutions. The full course is called classifier design. That a very famous Russian book called Kuncheva, author, Design of Classifiers. Very good book. The whole book is all about designing classifiers in at least 50 different ways. Okay. Then after that, you evaluate the classifier. For example, you give 3 tests and then you ask the students to take the exam. What are you really doing? You are training the student to write the VTU exam. You are doing the training. The exam is given by somebody else. That is where they are tested. So you want the student to perform very well on the test. Therefore, you train very well. Same thing that's happening with all these JEE entrance exams. You want your son or daughter to do very well in JEE. So you send them to coaching classes where they train you to write that exam well. Nobody learns well. They only learn how to pass an exam. This is what our education is. Our education is all about passing an exam but not learning. Okay? But nevertheless, this is the way it goes. So you finally evaluate the classifier and say how well. That's why even some student fails in the VT exam, he is asked to rewrite the exam. Many times they repeat the course. Many times they complain the teacher did not teach well, therefore they did not perform well. All these are problems of teaching, training and testing. So, a lot of useful and important applications have been done, but to do this, must solve many issues for successful pattern learning. Extracting features, collecting data, training properly, testing properly. Then there is a third stage called verification on the third party data. We will do that. Okay. Then there are a lot of problems that this data is of very high dimension. I'll come to that. You just see here. Okay. You are trying to solve a problem. What techniques will you use? If I know a lot about the problem, meaning I know the, let's say, the conditional probability of data points, right? For example, there is what doctors do. If I have a cold and a cough and a running nose and a fever, I classify it as flu or viral infection. If I have simply fever with no cold and cough, high fever, then it could be typhoid or malaria, whatever. It will not be viral. The moment it is viral, it will have cold and cough and running nose. So there are conditional probabilities associated with various features. If I know a lot about them, then I can do Bayes decision theory, conditional probability, and solve the problem. But if I don't know anything about the problem, I just have data. I don't know what it is, how it looks, what it does, what the features are also I don't know. I will do unsupervised learning and clustering. This is knowing a lot about the data. This is knowing very little about the data. In between, I know little less about the data. I know little less. I know lot less. I know very little. So depending on how much you know, you can try different types of approaches. And many times, what we think we know, we will not know. So you may have to try other methods to get your answer. This is it, you see. As the number of features increase, the error starts decreasing, but it reaches a minimum and starts getting bad. You overfitting, very bad answers you get. Here it is underfitting. This is the proper fit, number of features. Okay, but how do I know how many features to use for a problem? Unsolvable. You have to do trial and error. That's why a computer is needed. You see here how bad the problem is. You take, for example, the image face detection. So suppose it is k by m array. So you will have typically k into m, and very bad. You see, even by 20 by 20 is 400 dimension space. I don't need. Very bad sample space, huge samples. That's what. So we don't really work with such large dimension, even though the data exists in very large dimension. Our work will be in small subspace. That portion Arul will do. Today by evening you should be familiar with the idea of subspaces, which give you the representation of data in a very low dimension. Okay, this is really what it is. There are many ways to reduce the dimension. Okay, high dimensionality is both challenging and redundant. Try to reduce. For example, I have a vector with d this thing. I create a function of this with k much less than d. I can do this. I have this. I reduce it to this 4-dimension vector. I reduce it to 2-dimension. I can do many ways. We'll see that. Okay. So predominantly there are two methods. One is principal component analysis, which will be done little by me, but in detail done by Arul and others. Okay. So what is principal component analysis? Just look at this problem in 2 dimensions. I have x-axis, y-axis. I can call it dimension 1, dimension 2. These are the data points. The idea is, can I fit a straight line such that the projected values of these points on this straight line is a good approximation to this data set. So question to ask is, which is that line? Suppose I have this line and I project this onto this line, project this onto this line, etc., and say this line represents all this data. But what is the error? Length of this square plus length of this square plus length of this square, all the length of this square under square root is the total error. But you see the same data, if I fit this straight line, what is the error done? Little here, little more here, little more. This is practically on the line. So of all the lines, how many lines can I pass through these points? Infinite. Of all the infinite lines, this line is the best representation of these data points with minimum square of the error. This is the idea of principal component analysis. So we now use this and do, for example, I project onto this and rotate this. I will get a linear ordering of this data points, highly compressed, very good approximation to this. I'll even show you how it looks. Suppose I have a data elliptic cloud, that is ellipsoid in 3 dimensions. If I do this, it will look like this in 2 dimensions. It will look like this straight line in 1 dimension. So this is the original data. This is the best 2D approximation of this. This is in 3D, this is in 2D, this is in 1D. So given data in 10,000 dimension, I can find a very good approximation of this in 100 dimension. See, compared to 10,000, 100 is very small. 100 is manageable. I can code all the 100 coordinate values. So I must find the best low dimensional approximation to a problem. Of course, there's also this idea of training. Uh, when you start training well, the error becomes small, but don't try zero error in training because in testing it may fail very badly, which is true. This is really what it is. So you see here, as you train more and more, the error drops, but on the trained classifier, if you test, the error starts increasing. So this is over training. When should you stop? You should stop training here at a point when the testing error is minimum. This is what happens to many students who over prepare for the exam. Full night they study, they train very well for the exam. Next day morning they come, see the question paper, and then they go blank or they lose their concentration. So always be relaxed when you are trying to do a difficult job. Train well, but don't overtrain. Best trained youngsters managed it. Okay. Listen, stop training here. The third part is validation. Training, testing, validation by a third party data. You have to be very careful because this validation data will be given by somebody else. You use the training data. Portion of the data which is not used for training will be used for testing. But very similar data given by a third party will be used for validation. Okay. Other problem with data. What is training data? Data on which learning is performed, that is training. Test data used to assess network generalization capability. What is validation data? Validation data is used to determine any of the other variables. Now suppose I didn't have features. I didn't have features for the data. What do I do? We have many problems for which data may not have the features or the labels as they are called. Okay. What do? I do something called the unsupervised. See, I've just given a set of fishes, length, number of fins, light, nothing is mentioned. Data is given. I want to group it like this finally. So I want to cluster all similar objects. So this is called unsupervised learning, where I don't have labels or features, which is a very serious problem in medical diagnosis. That's why when you take the scan data has actually supplied to a radiologist who takes it. After that, an oncologist or somebody will label the data and say, oh, this numbers, this fellow has this kind of problem. They will circle it and put a signature there saying it is like this. So it's called labeling. Label is what gives you the information about feature. I have a lot of data with no features. What do I do? How do I classify them? Because without classifying, I cannot move further. That is known as unsupervised. How do I do unsupervised? Because learning is harder. That is unsupervised learning without a teacher. Like in what happens in many bad colleges, where there are no teachers or teachers hardly teach, or in many cases teachers teach the wrong thing. How do students pass? They have to learn on their own without the teacher. Okay. We nevertheless need it because labeling large data sets is very costly, like speech recognition. Sometimes can label only a few examples by hand. I cannot do for all. We may have no idea what or how many classes they are in that data, so that you do data mining. We may want to use cluster to gain some insight into the structure of the data before designing a classifier. For example, I cluster the data, generate a feature for that, then do supervise. These are called hybrid learning. I do unsupervised first, use the output from the unsupervised classifier through clustering techniques, extract features for that, go back and use those features as a label to do supervised learning, find the answer. All this. It is like people who don't know how to solve a problem, but they look at a worked example, follow it, then try similar approaches. That's why books like Sham series are very popular. Sham series is very popular even in America because majority of the students learn on their own very well. And Sham series books are useful for self-learning. They are not very good for mature insight, but they help you pass the exam even if the teacher is not there, etc., etc. Okay. How is clustering done? It's like this. I have 4 plus 3, 7 plus 5, 7 plus 6, 13 data points. How do I group them? Are these 3 groups good? Or should I have only 2 groups? Or should I have 13 separate groups? This is the problem. Or I can have one group putting all together. What is better? Clustering is a way to discover new classes or categories. This is really what it is. I use what is called similarity measure. Similarly, dissimilarity or distance measure. So, small similarity between 2 data points means there is a large distance between them. Large similarity between 2 data points means distance between them should be small. For example, what is the distance between what is the distance between 2 Indians, and what is the distance between an Indian and a European? How we solve pattern recognition problems? Or indirectly I'm asking, given 2 Indians, how similar are they? For example, color of the skin, then the height, weight, width, then the nose structure, then the color of the eye. All these are very similar between 2 Indians. Whereas this is very dissimilar between Indian and an European. This is how measures of similarity and dissimilarity are used when labels are not available. Based on that, we classify. For example, I don't know how many of you have experienced it, but when you are traveling within India, you don't go and wave at anybody. Hello, who are you? How are you? You don't do that. Because you are among all the similar kind. On the other hand, when you go abroad, when you go to America or Europe, there are a lot of people walking in the airport, but suddenly you will see somebody wearing a turban or a kurta pajama. Immediately you will wave at him, even if you don't know him. He's from India. All you notice is some similarity culturally between you and him, and you wave. You may not even know him anymore in your life. So these kind of things that happen, even in, let's say, in a hostel mess, in a table, people cluster together, all those who talk similar language. You may not become their friends later, but first time you want to go stick to somebody close to you. Same thing happens in functions. You have a function in the college, just observe. All the ladies will go and sit together. They may not be from the same department, but they go and cluster together. This is the similarity and dissimilarity measure. Okay. So now I have this. See, I have all these data points. If I run a clustering algorithm well, it will make these 3 good clustering, but this is very bad clustering. It is also clustering. One group, second group, third group. This is also one group, second group, third group. So we need to find algorithms to compute clustering, like k-means, nearest neighbor, so many avatars of clustering algorithms. So entire machine learning is dominated by two types: classification algorithms and clustering algorithms. These dominate the whole field of data science. So you must, in general, know these things. How you apply to what? So it's like this: whether three clusters are a good answer or two clusters. What are the ways? For example, you see the distance between this object and this object is zero because this is the same object. One ನಿಮಿಷ ತಾಳು. So distance between this object and this object is zero because this is the same object rotated. This is for face recognition. For face recognition, you must declare the distance between two such objects as zero. Whereas if you want to do character recognition, you must describe the distance between 9 and 6 as very large. Because 9, if I rotate it like this, 180 degrees, it will look like 6. So even here, the type of problem, the domain of the task tells you how to use. So now more or less, what are the distances? Distance between a point, Euclidean distance. Distance between 2 points, which is called the Manhattan distance or the city block distance. The third distance between 2 points is the Chebyshev distance. This is L2, L1, L infinity. These are the standard norms that people use for distance. Of course, I can also use cosine similarity difference, that is how close these two data points are. After all, this is just a rotated version of this with some scale. Okay. So the simple clustering algorithm is this. I start with a seed point, pick a radius, let's say d naught, and say all points within that radius d naught belong to this. If I keep the d naught very small, all of them become individual clusters. If I pick the d naught very large, it will become one cluster. So I must choose that. I must choose a seed point and choose this thing. How do I do? This is the trick. The trick for clustering is just simple. Use the distance idea, no doubt, but do the following. Suppose I have a centroid here and a distance d0, another centroid c1, distance d1, centroid c2, distance d2. I must know the following. That distance between two data points in the same cluster is very small. The distance between any data point here and the nearest data point here is very large. So, intra-cluster distances and inter-cluster distances are the two metrics. I want distance within this very small, distance between this group and this very large. So it is a minimax problem. I minimize within the cluster distance to be very small. I maximize the distance amongst clusters very large. That's why it is a two-stage optimization process. Okay, that's how these clustering algorithms are by and large deployed. Okay, see how the actual analysis is done. Huge dimension. I'll come to that. You see here. So simple recognition, classification of objects, shape, size, and color with two features. Object, 8 different objects. What is their area? What is their perimeter? Area is one feature. Perimeter is another feature. With two features, classification mode. With 3 features, I add color. Classification becomes very good. Okay, so you'll see here, good classification. Okay. generally this is what happens. You see, a real object is in infinite dimension. I capture it through a camera, I get in p dimension. Then I reduce the do image to feature extraction, then classification to very small. And then rotate it and put it in one dimensional category. So P is much less than the real one, N is much less than that, and actual classification class is very small. Typically, a infinite dimension problem is captured as a 512 by 5, and finally lower dimensional representation of 200 finally put into a 20 class problem. This is typically how the entire flow of dimensionality reduction done for classification. Okay. Now we will have some questions. We have about 10 minutes time for questions. Feel free to ask. Any questions? Any questions?
Any questions from participants end, you can ask. Suppose if you don't have a microphone, you can put it in the chat box so that I will tell to the Ashok Rao sir.
One of the simplest ways to take the speech waveform and then extract the LPC coefficients or Mel spectrum coefficients. So the various things that are done. Normally LPC coefficients or Mel spectrum, many other Berg coefficients, so many things are there. Okay. So that depends on what kind of work you are trying to do and how accurate you want, etc. Is it supervised or not? If you have a database of well-labeled voice patterns, you can do supervised. If you don't have labels, you can do unsupervised. You really want most of the text-to-speech, text-to-text, speech-to-speech converters, all of them use supervised.
Good morning, sir. This is Renuka. Sir, I have a doubt. I'm working on supervised learning, sir, classification problem. Sir, I have a doubt of data augmentation, sir. Data augmentation is just increasing the data space or number of images required for training and testing. I have a very limited data set of 300 images. So obviously they say...
What images they are?
They are of microscopic images, sir.
Okay.
So when we do data augmentation, we can, by using simple transformations like scaling and then rotation, all those things, we can increase the data set, sir. But with that increased data set, what classifier model we are going to design, how sure we can be of that performance of the classifier model, sir?
Okay.
Those are of the same images, but in a different directions, in a different transformations, we get those augmented images.
Okay.
Can we validate the classifier model with those augmented images?
Just unmute. I will mute your audio. I will speak. So this problem of data augmentation is very clear. You have trained on a limited data set and you want to test it on an augmented data set. The problem here is the following. From the training, what you have done is you have extracted features from the training set and you have trained your classifier. Now the augmented data set, if it actually contains all the features that you have already used in training, it is likely to perform well. But because of the augmented data set, it has few other features not belonging to the classes that you have already extracted out of the training data set, you will get very bad answers. So you must be very clear whether you are augmenting the data set and the data set is either invariant in some sense, either rotation invariant or translation invariant to the original data set, then the problem doesn't exist. But if it is not invariant, then you are in trouble because a classifier which was trained well performs very badly on the augmented data set. So I would ask you to work separately the augmented data set and see whether the number of classes there is exactly the number of classes that you have already used in your limited training data set. Then you will know whether the classifier model can be extended or not. Otherwise, you will have to try a new classifier model. Is it okay?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir. This is, I got it, sir. But the thing is, when we do invariant transformations, which will not disturb and just to increase the data set, we are doing these transformations. Then how can we validate the classifier model, which has already learned all the new classifiers? And when we give it a new data set, which is totally different from the training, then obviously classifier model will not perform well.
Yeah, the classifier should be invariant to rotational data or translation data. If the classifier model is not invariant with respect to translation of data or rotation of data, then you get into trouble. So
then what's the use of data augmentation, sir? Just to increase number of...
What is the use of augmented data is the reality is augmented. You get very little good samples. So you must design a topper in your college. The topper in a college will get first rank in BTU, but if you put that candidate under GATE exam, he or she will fail because the candidate is not robust. For some other testing of similar kind, they will fail. So you must build a robust classifier.
Yes, sir. Yes, that's true, sir.
Classifier, you must test the classifier under noisy data, imprecise data, all that you must. You cannot design a classifier on clean data and get it.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Look for robust classifiers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Add robustness to your classifier.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Any other question?
Sir, how can clustering improve the data compression rate?
For example, clustering will improve. Suppose you have 10 data points in a cluster. All the 10 data points will be represented by the centroid and the distance. Suppose you have 100 data points, they are represented equivalently by one centroid and the radius around it. The essence of 100 data points is in that. That's how clustering improves the data compression. You got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions from audience you can ask?
Okay, if there are no questions, we can stop. Arul will start at 11:30. Arul is one of our favorite students. He's one of the best students that we have had in IAC for a very long time. So happy to work with him for 7-8 years and subsequently. So he has worked very hard. Let's be very clear. He is good today because he has worked very hard. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Manjunath. Thanks to Global Academy. Convey my regards to Professor R.P. Reddy. I'm sure the next sessions will get better. Sharath is exceedingly good. He's about to submit his thesis in machine learning in IAC mechanical department. Roshan has finished his PhD in Kharagpur. Has worked a lot in clustering algorithms, which he will do. Have a nice time. I don't think I will attend to any more sessions. The younger generation will do better than me. I know that. Yeah. So if there are anything, please post your queries, and I'll share this material with Professor Manjunath by today evening. He can distribute it to all the parts. That is today's material and yesterday's. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir. So thank you for the excellent session. All the participants made use of it. Thank you very much, sir, for presenting 2 sessions from your end. So from after second session, Arul sir will continue. Dear participants, at sharp 11:30, so you can log in back. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.